Around 20 kilometers from Kyoto, the showroom of a major sensor manufacturer. On display are the latest automatic door sensors.
Non-visible light is coming from there.
Just how is the sensor detecting people? Here's what the scene looks like using a special camera. The sensor is putting out infrared radiation, which can't be seen by the human eye. This model projects infrared rays onto 60 spots. When someone steps into this zone, the sensor detects the infrared being scattered and opens the door. Our story begins back in 1979. Large buildings and facilities were being built all over Japan. Over in Kyoto, an engineer was hard at work. Kobayashi Toru, age 31, an employee of a company which made security devices. It was a small business which made sensors for security companies to detect intruders. Kobayashi had to fill multiple roles, from product development and design to sales.
When I joined the company, there were only 7 other people, so I did a bit of everything. Security sensors weren't widely used yet. As an engineer, it was gratifying to work on something fresh like that.
One day, Kobayashi was sent to talk about their products at an exhibition for security devices. As he worked the booth, a visitor brought up something he hadn't thought of before. This sensor is for detecting intruders, but could you use it for automatic doors instead?
The man was from a company that made automatic doors. He was asking questions about our product and wondering whether our security sensor could work with automatic doors. I'd only been thinking about security, so it really opened my eyes to the demand for automatic doors.
At that time, automatic doors were being installed in buildings all over Japan. You stepped on a mat with a switch underneath to trigger the doors. But things like rain or high heels could damage the switches. Also, small children were sometimes too light to activate the switches.
They were called rubber mat switches. When building one, you made a hole with concrete and set the mat inside so that it wouldn't move. That tended to collect water. Rain would get in. It required a lot of construction work and it broke easily. So there was demand for something new.
That was how Kobayashi settled on his concept for an automatic door sensor. He decided to bet on this new idea, leaving his job to start his own company. Development started right away. Kobayashi had a lead on the type of technology he wanted to use. During his time at the security device company, he had consulted a research group specializing in infrared radiation. Through interactions with academic and industry researchers, he learned about technology which used far infrared radiation.
We have infrared thermometers now, and thermography. Far infrared was something like the basis for these kinds of things, before they were common. There were very few consumer products that used far infrared when we were considering it for security devices. It was the early days.
Far infrared is emitted by everything with a temperature. At the time, it was used by the military for things like homing missiles, which detected far-infrared radiation coming from a target. Humans also emit far-infrared. If a sensor could pick it up, you would know if someone was approaching. Kobayashi envisioned a set of doors with a sensor above it. It would detect the far-infrared from someone walking up. Then, it would signal the mechanism to open the doors.
The idea was for the far-infrared sensor to read the temperature of the floor. A person entering the area would cause the temperature to suddenly change, and the radiation going into the sensor would change suddenly too. That would be detected and trigger the doors to open.
Kobayashi began work on a prototype, but there was trouble immediately. The sensor was about 2 meters above the floor. In order to detect the far infrared emitted by a person, it would need to be very sensitive. Was there a sensor up to the task? Kobayashi researched makers across Japan. But the applications for far infrared were limited to military use or special cases. Kobayashi couldn't find a single supplier in Japan. Did the far infrared sensor component exist? Kobayashi began looking overseas. After a long search, he found something promising. Over in the United Kingdom, a company had a component.
In the end, I was helped by the Infrared Science and Technology Society, which has members in many fields. Someone that worked in defense pointed me in the right direction. From that, I was able to find something after contacting a bunch of different places.
Feeling uncertain but hopeful, Kobayashi ordered the component from the UK. It was time to test whether it could detect far infrared coming from a person. He installed the part into his prototype and walked up. The doors opened. And so, in November of 1979, after 3 months of development, the automatic door sensor, which detected people approaching, was complete. One day, the phone rang at the office.
The door keeps opening and closing on its own. What's wrong with it?
The doors would suddenly open and close and clang about. Some would just stay open. We were getting complaints like that.
Just what was going on? They checked the parts from the sensor to the door opener, but nothing was wrong with them. There was nothing to fix, so all they could do was give the doors a good cleaning and head back.
We polished up the glass as best we could. There wasn't anything else to be done, and we wanted to show that we were being earnest. But really, I felt like crying because of the situation.
And then June. Complaints about the doors started pouring in. Kobayashi threw himself into finding the cause. One day, it hit him. June is the rainy season in Japan. Maybe it was the heat and high humidity causing the doors to malfunction. But how could he prove it? The company was small and lacked equipment. Unlike a major manufacturer, they didn't have the proper testing facilities. But Kobayashi had an idea. Rice cookers, a staple of Japanese households. Put in rice and water, turn it on, and you have freshly cooked rice in under an hour. The heat and humidity gets very high inside the cooker as it operates.
You turn on an electric rice cooker with water inside, and it gets to over 90 degrees in there, full of steam. The idea was to test the components by putting them in the rice cooker.
Kobayashi went ahead and placed sensor components into a rice cooker. The heat was turned on. Then, 1 hour later, as expected, moisture had gotten inside the components. A new component which could keep the moisture out was needed. Kobayashi contacted multiple companies in Japan to see whether they could make it. He knew someone who worked at a major electronics manufacturer in Osaka and was able to secure their cooperation. This new part was placed into the rice cooker for testing. One hour later, Kobayashi gingerly picked up a component. From the outside, it looked totally fine. But was it still working properly? Hoping for the best, Kobayashi set up the sensor using the test components. Nervously, he flipped the switch. The sensor was on. He waited, and the doors did not incorrectly open by themselves. But would it still detect a person? He slowly approached the doors. They slid open. He tried again and again, and it worked every time.
I was so happy. It was a new product. We were pioneers, and we were fixing the technical problems as they came up. But now it felt like we'd finally worked it all out. It felt like it was finally complete.
It's been over 40 years since the first model. Automatic door sensors are now an essential part of our daily lives.